Forgive the intrusion, Captain Marshall. My condolences. Forgive me, but I must impose upon you.
Carry on.
Poirot, I just saw a shadow by the balcony door. I think someone is out there listening.
Ah, well, we will let them listen, I think. Mrs. Marshall was your second wife?
Yes.
You have been married how long?
Just over 2 years.
The marriage? It was a happy one?
Certainly.
Have you any idea who might have killed your wife?
None whatever.
Had she any enemies?
Possibly.
I say.
Oh?
Don't misunderstand me. Arlena was an actress. She was also a good-looking woman. She aroused a certain amount of jealousy, envy, hatred, malice.
From men as well as women?
Mostly women.
Was Mrs. Marshall previously acquainted with anyone in this hotel?
I believe she had met Mr. Redfern before, at some cocktail party.
How did you spend your time this morning?
I breakfasted downstairs at 10 minutes after 9 o'clock. After that, I went down to the bathing beach where I saw you. I had a quick bathe. Let me see. At about 20 minutes to 11, I returned here to type some letters. I typed until 10 minutes to 12. I then changed into tennis kit as I had a date to play tennis at 12.
Who else played the tennis?
Mrs. Redfern, Miss Darnley, and Mr. Gardner. I went down at 12 o'clock. Miss Darnley was there. Mr. Gardner and Mrs. Redfern arrived a few minutes later. We played for about an hour. Just as we came into the hotel afterwards, I got the news.
When was the last time you saw your wife?
9 o'clock. She was in her room opening her letters.
What was her manner? Unusual at all?
No, perfectly normal.
Did she mention at all what were the contents of the letters?
No.
You did not, pardon me, object to your wife's friendship with Monsieur Redfern?
I wasn't in the habit of criticizing my wife's conduct.
You did not protest or object in any way?
Certainly not.
Packet of lies. We overheard them arguing.
You will not deny then that Monsieur Redfern admired your wife?
He probably did. Most men did. She was a very beautiful woman.
You were persuaded there was nothing personal in the affair?
I never thought about it.
Utter rot.
Did your wife leave a will?
You know, I'm not sure.
Her solicitors?
Barkett and Applegood, Bedford Square. They handled all of her business affairs.
Was she well off?
Well, yes, her career was very successful, as I've told you. I would expect she was worth in the neighborhood of £50,000.
Then you would call your wife a rich woman?
I'll say.
I suppose she was, really. See here, Poirot. Aren't you getting a good way from the essentials of this business? What I believe or don't believe is surely not relevant to the plain fact of murder.
You do not comprehend, Captain Marshall. There is no such thing as the plain fact of murder. Murder springs 9 times out of 10 out of the character and circumstances of the murdered person. Because the victim was the kind of person he or she was, therefore was he or she murdered. Until we can comprehend fully and completely exactly what kind of person Arlena Marshall was, we shall not be able to see clearly exactly the kind of person who murdered her.
Was there anything else?
Not at present, thank you.
Feel free to nose around all you like. I need some air.
I'd certainly like to see what Miss Marshall has stashed in there.
Then the combination to the box, it must be found. Trial and error will not open it.
That's a rather nasty-looking stick pin. More green fabric. From the ashes, it looks like quite a bit was burned here. Linda's watch. It agrees with yours exactly, Poirot.
Therefore the watch, it is correct to the second. May I put to you some questions, mademoiselle?
Of course, I'll do anything I can to help.
Could you please tell me of your movements this morning?
I had breakfast shortly after 9, say 10 past. Then I collected my book, spoke with you in the lobby briefly, and went to read at the Ledgers. That must have been about 25 past 10. I came back to the hotel about 10 minutes to 12, got my tennis racket and played until about 1.
From about 10:30 until 20 minutes of 12, you were at the Ledges and never left there during that time?
Not entirely. At about 11, I went back to my room to fetch my sun hat. I saw Kenneth Marshall typing in his room.
Indeed? From the hall, perhaps? Or the balcony?
The hall. His door was slightly ajar.
Did you see Madame Marshall this morning?
No.
You did not see her as she paddled her float round to Cutter's Cove?
No, she must have gone before I got there.
Did you see anyone at all on a float or in a boat?
At the Ledgers? Possibly Mr. Blatt. At least I think it was his boat. It had a white sail, though.
You didn't see Monsieur Redfern and Mademoiselle Brewster when they rode past?
No, I don't think I did. You see, I was reading, only glancing up occasionally.
Did anyone pass you on the path?
I was on the lower ledge. Unless someone had called out to me, I doubt I would have noticed them.
You were, I think, acquainted with Captain Marshall?
He is an old family friend. We grew up next door to one another, although I had not seen him for a good many years. It must be nearly 12.
Were the Marshalls on good terms with one another?
On perfectly good terms, I should say.
Monsieur Marshall, he was very devoted to his wife?
Ken, Mr. Marshall, is rather old-fashioned. He hasn't got the modern habit of shouting matrimonial woes upon the housetop.
Did you like Madame Marshall?
No.
Why was that?
She was bored to death with women and showed it. On the other hand, men were a very different story.
Do you think her husband was aware of her interests in that line?
I think that he accepted his wife quite frankly for what she was. He had no illusions about her, but I could be wrong.
Do you know of anyone with a grudge against Madame Marshall?
Only wives, but since she was strangled, I presume that it was a man who killed her.
Mademoiselle, may I ask a favor of you?
You found my typewriter, Monsieur Poirot. I am in your debt.
What would you have me ask, Hastings? Could you compare some pieces of fabric for me?
I would be happy to. Fabric is something I know quite a bit about.
Merci. The perfect favor to ask. You are learning to exercise their little grey cells with great skill. It would seem the obvious request.
This cut piece is fine silk. From a lady's hat, I would say. The torn bit is rayon, inexpertly dyed. And this burnt piece is from the same rayon as the torn fabric.
Many thanks, mademoiselle. I thank you for your cooperation.